Welcome to the Militia gaming community. I'm Trigger, and today I'm going to give you 10 tips to make you better at drifting in Need for Speed Heat, and this one is for beginners. Let's go! Real quick before we get into the video, I just want to mention that we have a Discord channel for Militia Gaming, and in that Discord there are plenty of crews who are recruiting, and they're level 50 on all three platforms with the exception of Xbox. They might be really close to 50 but not quite there yet. Anyway, if you're looking for a level 50 crew, you can click the link in the description of this video, join our Discord, and check out the channel that says Need for Speed Crews. Alright, let's get into the video so we don't waste too much time here. The first tip I want to give you is use the right build. So often I see people just slapping all of the drift parts on the car and saying how crappy the drifting is in Need for Speed Heat. While I would agree that the drifting is much different in Heat than literally every other game, I wouldn't call it crappy. It's just different, and the build you have to use to make the car drift really depend on the car, the skill of the driver, and the drift trial or drift zone you are attempting. So here are some starting builds for you to try out for each different type of drivetrain. For a rear-wheel drive car, which tends to be the highest scoring drift cars in the game, start with Super Speed Cross suspension, Elite drag tires, and Pro Drift differential. For an all-wheel drive drift car, start with the Super Showcase suspension, Pro Drift tires, and the Sport Drift differential. And for a front-wheel drive car, start with the Pro Drift suspension, Elite drift tires, and the Pro Drift differential. These are very good starting points, and you can fine-tune your builds from there, as well as all of the rest of the parts on the build. They don't really matter too much as long as you've got enough power to keep the wheels spinning. So put your highest tier parts on the engine and make sure that you have the Elite plus clutch and so on and so forth. All right, at number 2, make sure that you have the correct live tuning. It is super helpful for any build to have the steering sensitivity set to +5 and your downforce to be set at -5. This helps the car feel lighter and more responsive to your input. At number 3, learn how to countersteer. This is essential in getting better at drifting. I have an old video where I describe countersteering and I give you a drift build for the EVO IX. I'll put a link to that video in the description down below. Go check that out and pay attention to the part that I talk about how to use the car. It's important, and it applies to pretty much every other drift car in the game. At number 4, the drift mechanic used in racing is very important to drifting as well. You have to understand what tells the game that you want to drift the car, and it's actually two things that you do in sequence. First, you let off the throttle and then press it again. That tells the game that if you turn sharp enough, you want your car to slide. The other thing is simply turning sharp enough shortly after you do that. So practice this sequence. Let off the gas, then press it again, then turn. If you've got one of the builds that I mentioned in the first tip, your car will for sure drift the corner. At number 5, there are 3 spots I recommend for practicing your drifting. There are probably other spots in the game, but these 3 offer something unique that helps you with your control. The first is Port Murphy. There's a lot of open space and a bunch of big containers to drift around with no traffic. This is a great spot to learn to control your car by attempting to drift through some of the smaller gaps as I'm doing here in the video. The next is Palm City Raceway. This has a drift zone in it that has virtually no obstacles, and it can provide you a way to track your progress by looking at your score. And the last is the Dome Ruler Drift Zone located in Eden Shores. The dome itself is a great place to practice your control because you can drift around it forever while trying to avoid the cars that drive on that road. It's a good challenge for someone who understands drifting but wants to improve his control. At number 6, use all of the space you are given for a maximum score. You don't have to stay on the most obvious path or the road. You can extend beyond that road into the grass or to the dirt for a much higher score. Just keep in mind that if you go too far away from the drift path, it will stop the drift and you'll have to start over. At number 7, keeping your 4x multiplier makes a big difference in your score, so understand what things will cause you to lose it and avoid those like the plague. Breakable structures, light posts, signs, and trees do not take away your multiplier. but immovable objects like the bigger trees, other cars, and buildings will delete your multiplier. So make sure that you understand which things will reset the multiplier before you attempt the drift zone or trial that you're going for, so that you can stay away from those things. At number 8, drift points are awarded based on the angle of your car and the length of the drift, not the speed. Many people think that you need to be going fast to get a lot of points, but the reality is that you earn points while sliding sideways, and the faster you go, the faster your drift is over. Now, don't get me wrong, some cars will require some speed to keep the drift going, but when you can find that perfect balance between speed and length of drift with a really good drift angle, you will score the highest. At number 9, use the handbrake when necessary. Unlike some of my other videos where I tell you to stay away from the handbrake when you're racing, it actually does come in handy with drifting. It's a good way to transition between drifting left and right and vice versa. A small handbrake tab just before steering the opposite direction helps the weight of the car shift and swing the car around to the other side quickly. You should be careful with this though, because too much handbrake can cause you to lose some speed, and you might have to speed back up again by going straight before you can continue drifting. And lastly, at number 10, some cars just aren't great for drifting, and that's okay. I have a video with the top 5 cars in drifting that features builds for all of them for both automatic and manual transmission drivers. A link to that video will be in the description down below, so check it out if you want more build options for your drift adventures. This RX-7 happens to be the number 1 car on that list. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, you can DM me anytime on Instagram, Twitter, or Discord. I read every single message and I reply when I have a little bit of time to do so, so don't hesitate to ask questions. Shout out to all the Militia subs. Trigger out.